everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to teachers, colleagues, students, alumni, and friends from actually around the world. Welcome to the Teaching and Learning Seminar on how to encourage student participation in online learning. I'm Queenie Lai, Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning, Chinese University of Hong Kong Faculty of Law. It's really wonderful to see longtime colleagues and alumni and friends on the registration list. So thank you for taking your time to join this seminar today. So unfortunately, the fifth wave of COVID has hit Hong Kong, and we are back to online learning again after a very short window of face-to-face learning in term one. But learning must continue. Even in the most challenging of times and without any compromise on quality or student engagement. We as legal educators owe a duty to our students and to the legal community to give the best possible education and learning experience our students deserve. So I hope this seminar today is a timely initiative to discuss and reflect on some practical tips and strategies on how to motivate and engage learners in online learning. Special thanks to Dean Wolf and Professor Michael Lower and admin colleague Jaden for their support for this seminar and for their continuous dedication to teaching and learning matters at CUHK Law. Please, may I encourage everyone to put in your comments or questions or ideas and feedback in the chat function, either privately to me or to everyone, to all the participants. I'm sure all of you have a different experience with online learning. I would love to hear your feedback on this. So if we have time at the end, I would love to hear your feedback on this. So today I'll be sharing some practical tips and strategies, mainly from my personal experience based on 2.5 years of online teaching. I think it's really time for us to reflect and share what we've learned, what I've learned. I've consulted some research and literature, but largely it's based on my own personal practical experience, and I'll be sharing some of my original class planning and designs with you all. The focus today is on strategies for online synchronous learning. So it's Zoom, live lectures, and tutorials. There won't be time today to discuss offline or asynchronous learning, Blackboard, community of inquiries, blended learning, hybrid learning, micromodules are beyond the scope of discussion today, as that would really require a separate session. But today I focus on engaging students online in live lectures. So today's session, it's 4 core themes today. How to encourage student participation in online learning, motivating students, active learning, and creating a sense of community in online learning, expectation matters, and promoting interactivity in online tutorials and lectures. These are the concepts I want to explore with you all today, and I will illustrate with examples. The first 3 topics today here, in fact, are to me the keys to student engagement, whether online or offline. At the end of the day, if we want students to participate, these are to me, after I reflect on my own teaching for the past decade, these are the keys to effective teaching and learning, whether online or offline. Motivation, active learning, sense of community, and high expectations. Now, I just want to share, some teachers ask me, when students don't participate or don't turn on their cameras in online learning, what should we do? I want to talk about the carrot and stick approach. There is a stick approach where we tell them or make an announcement and say, if you don't turn on your cameras, you'll be asked to leave the session. Or if you don't come fully prepared or participate in the tutorials, you'll be penalized or you won't do well in exams. I personally find it much more effective. It's the carrot approach, which is to motivate students, their intrinsic motivation, ignite their desire to learn, to have an interest in the subject, and to ensure that they understand that the participation is for their own benefit. So this is a much more inviting way to encourage student participation than the negative stick approach. Students learn because they want to, not because they have to. So how do we motivate students? These are the ways I motivate my students. And I want to share with you all today. So explaining why participation is required, explaining my teaching philosophy early on in the course, explaining the relevance of the subject, and explaining the purpose of each classroom activity. Before we teach the how, students must know the why. I actually take a lot of time in my first introductory lecture and before every classroom activity to explain why participation is required. So I take the time. In fact, I share with them, there are many webinars out there from law firms and, CPT courses out there. And sometimes I teach very similar topics to what law firm and CPT courses are doing out there. But I tell my students, there are two main differences between the webinars out there and my courses. Number one, I pitch at the entry level, I pitch at the level, which is the transition from law student to a lawyer. It's a layering approach. So I assume no prior knowledge and I lay out the foundation and build upon it step by step. And the other difference between webinars and my courses is that I've carefully designed active learning hands-on exercises that provides them with a deep learning experience as opposed to just surface learning. So that's why they must participate. That's why they need to interact with me, reflect and feedback that counts. This is how we help individual learners retain their knowledge. So I explained how, why participation, particularly online participation, is so important. Next, I explained my teaching philosophy very early on in the course. Teaching philosophies are not just for job applications or teaching award applications. I share it with my students that I'm teaching students not just for exams, but getting them ready, prepared for the real world of work. The reason I go into teaching is because I want to teach my students what I wish I learned before I enter into practice. At that time in those days, law school did not prepare me for my work. I was thrown to the deep end. Day one of my training contract at an international law firm, I walked into a data room. I have no idea what is due diligence, what is M&A, what is IPO. I have no idea what is a template or precedent. And I was thrown to the deep end. And I was, given ad hoc tasks, and I can't picture the deal from start to finish. So law school then really did not teach me how to, do well at my job at the law firm. So I tell my students, I'm teaching you not just for exams, I'm teaching them what I wish I learned before I enter into practice. And I wish that they were more prepared than I was and have a head start and succeed in practice. And hopefully, this would give them an intrinsic motivation to learn. I also explain the relevance of the subject. So how do I teach relevance? In my introductory lecture, I talk about the aims of my course, the learning outcomes. I want a clear roadmap for everyone before we start. So I teach them the clear learning outcomes. I go through with them the outline and the structure of my course so that they know clearly that I'm leading through them from a deal from start to finish at every stage of the deal. I would also talk about who would benefit from this course. Corporate lawyers to be, obviously, because my course is corporate finance. We teach them how to bring a company, advise clients to bring it to listing on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So corporate work. It's also beneficial to anyone who wants to get involved in regulatory work, compliance work, or litigation in the future. Because if you're ever involved in market misconduct or commercial litigation, you have to know these as a background. So it's an intrinsic motivation. I want them to understand who would benefit from this. And of course, is commercial awareness. I spend a lot of time telling them, it's not just about the rules. Law doesn't exist in a vacuum. We need to put the rules into context. And we're dealing with corporate clients out there. Very often clients complain about the fact that lawyers give them stilted legalese that they don't understand. So I'm teaching my students that it's so important they understand the market trends, the context, and the business language, and understand the client goals. So this is commercial awareness. So I share with them all this from my practice. Now, the relevance, how do I teach relevance? These are the ways I make them curious about my subject, interested in the subject, and share, I teach relevance and commercial awareness through these. So I use authentic materials. As often as I can, I use authentic learning materials. It's not hypothetical or fictional scenarios that I make up. It's real IPO cases, real familiar household names, IPO prospectuses, Hong Kong Stock Exchange announcement that they will on a day-to-day basis use as a corporate lawyer at work. I would refer them to source materials. Online, I would show them the website, exactly where to locate materials on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange website and SFC website. It's so important that my students learn to go to source materials because this is how it goes in practice. I tell them, don't rely on my slides or these are secondary notes. The rules and laws are updated on a daily basis. So you need to be independent learners to know where to find those materials. So this is how I share with them online, where to go for the materials. I use headline news, latest topical issues, keep abreast with the news, the latest ESG, environmental, social, and governance, SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, single gender boards, biotech listings. I keep them abreast of latest, January 2022, the latest news. So they know, it's relevant to them, to their work, to their life. So they understand when they read financial news in the future. And policy issues behind, I always explain, when I explain the rules, I also explain the policy reasons behind. They have to understand the historical context and how the rules evolves and the policy reasons behind it. So for example, in my course, through the Alibaba and Ant IPO, rise and fall of Alibaba IPO case study, I discuss the reasons for new listing rule chapters such as weighted voting rights and how securities regulators balance the protection of public shareholders' interest against maintaining Hong Kong Stock Exchange competitiveness. So it's not just the rules, it's the policies behind it as well, and the historical and market trends, and how Hong Kong is positioning itself, in the competitive market as an international capital markets these days. So I hope these, it's not a lot of law in the introductory lecture, but as I've said, law doesn't exist in a vacuum. I hope they see the relevance to their subjects. So that is how I, motivate them, explain the relevance. And then I would also explain the purpose of each classroom activity. Very often we assume students know why this classroom activity is meaningful to them. But I remind myself to not have this assumption that I must explain to them the benefits of these classroom activities. So as you will see in a minute, I'll share with you my client pitch exercise, and I tell them the benefits of learning from it, the transferable skills, authentic learning experience, how you, present to a client. So I'll share with you on this in a minute. But this, in relation to explaining purpose of each classroom activity, this leads to my second point on keys to student engagement. The way to engage students is to have hands-on activity, active learning, as opposed to passive learning. It's learner-centered. It's not teacher-centered. It requires more than just listening, especially in front of a Zoom, in the Zoom setting. You really want to get them involved, so that they're not just staring at the screen and not absorbing. So it requires the active participation of each and every student. As you all know, students retain 50% of what they see and hear, but they retain 90% of what they do. The other point, and I add to that because it comes with a package, active learning and teamwork and sense of community. Sense of community is so crucially important in an online learning context because the main difference between online and offline learning is the lack of face-to-face contact and the lack of social interaction before and after class. So students must feel that they belong to a community, a peer communities of learners, and that will have a significant impact on their learning experience. So I will share with you an original project, which I'm very proud of myself. It's my own project. And I thought it worked really well in an online environment as well. This is active learning in online environment. It's a client pitch exercise. It's an example I want to share with you all. It worked very well, face to face, but in an online context, it worked even better, I think. I've designed this client pitch project to make what is usually a very dry rule-based subject, learning about listing rules and the listing process of listing on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. I designed this to make it fun and interesting, and also to imitate real practice, okay, based on my own personal real experience. So what is a client pitch or beauty parade? So usually the majority of law firms' work comes from referral or returning customers, but pitching, it's a common method for law firms to secure new clients and new deals too. The pitching process, it's often referred to as beauty parade. And it involves a number of invited law firms presenting to clients, to potential clients, in order to secure a deal. So this exercise that I carefully designed, it's an original exercise which I designed, hopefully give my student a taste of corporate advisory work, corporate transactional work, and they understand what beauty parade is and what it takes to win new clients. In terms of substantive law, they understand the criteria for listing a company on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Now, I'm very, very grateful and fortunate to have the support of Professor Paul McHarg, who is a leading legal education expert, and his kind comment on this original project. And he is very kindly to invite me to share this project in London. This was before COVID times. I flew into London and I shared this project at a simulated client legal education conference organized by Society of Legal Scholars. So I think I'm glad to have that platform to share this project. Feedback from students: the interactive simulated client pitch exercise was a remarkable experience in her corporate finance course, which gave us the chance to think from the client's perspective. And this is unique and valuable in PCLL. So this exercise worked really well, surprisingly well in online settings. It ensures that all my students are fully engaged, their cameras on, everyone's listening. The benefit of this exercise is also that every pitch is different. There's no sample answer. I have in total 8 tutorial groups of 15 students each. So I need to design an exercise where they just don't have repeat the same answer, for the different groups. Every group comes with their own original judgment and insight and client advice. And, this is something I really appreciate. I'm so touched when I see my students coming with their own original analysis and ideas. And, you can see the effort they put into their slides. I'll show you more later. But you must remember this. This is only one tutorial out of 6 tutorials of the whole term. And it's not even summative assessment. The grades doesn't count. So, but they've produced such high quality work, that means that they're really engaged. And I'm always, so proud of my students who put in such efforts, even just for a summative or just a tutorial exercise. So this is them talking about latest ESG topics. I purposely asked them to present some topics that I haven't taught in my class, because at the end of the day, they have to be independent learners. And it's not just, they have to be producers of knowledge as well, not just the receiver. So they're, ESG is latest, this year, these rules come about this year. And, I encourage them to find out more and do the research. So this is what I share with them. This simulated client, I share with them and explain, the rationale behind this exercise. It's important students understand the rationale behind your exercises. So active and deep learning, it's not just rote memorization. It's deep learning as opposed to service learning. It's substantive law and skills-based training. They're not just learning the listing rules, they are learning a lot of transferable client-facing skills. It's authentic learning materials. It's based on real company synopsis, real client advisory work. It's based on real companies that actually went on to IPOs in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. It's contextual learning. I put rules into the context. And it's about developing professional identity. It's so important for them to think like a lawyer and understand the client's needs. And it's also about working on a range of client-facing skills, commercial awareness, communication, presentation skills that are crucial to their success as future legal practitioners. Around the world these days, regulators want centralized summative assessment, and the focus is always on test scores. But experience and research have repeatedly shown that it's through exercise, simulation, practice-based training with feedback and reflection that really prepares our students well ready for the real world of work. We are not training exam takers. These are the skills, that train them with interpersonal capabilities. Think about all the ethics and core issues. How do you meet client expectations? So these are what I want to bring in. It's not just the law, it's all these transferable skills. So how does my exercise work? It's 15 students per tutorial. And I would divide 15 students into seven students into two groups, law firm A and law firm B. Law firm A, it's a mining company that seeks to do IPO in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Law firm B, it's a biotech company that wants to do IPO in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So why mining company and biotech companies? It's because these are the special chapters under Hong Kong Stock Exchange rules. These mining and biotech, these are the companies that don't meet the profit or revenue requirements under Chapter 8, the main board listing rules, because they are pre-profit, pre-revenue. It takes a long time for a biotech to, after R&D, to come into commercialization. So these are the specialist chapters. So I want the students to understand the interrelation between main Chapter 8 main board listing requirements and the specialist chapters, why mining and biotech companies need to follow the special chapters. So in their respective groups, they have to prepare a 30 to 40-minute PowerPoint presentation with the aim of winning the company as the potential new client and winning the deal. And it's providing preliminary legal advice in relation to the client's plan to go listing in Hong Kong. Now, students would not just be reading off the listing rules, they would be envisaging themselves as legal practitioners and think of commercially practical solutions and how best to meet client expectations. The aim at the end of the day is to train our students to be effective corporate legal practitioners who are not just technically competent, but commercially aware, who can relate to clients and contextualize their advice. So this is the client pitch beauty parade. There are different ways to do it. Simulated clients is, I'm often the one who's role playing the client. I'm the CEO of the client. And in some years, I've involved actors as well, because I want the students to have a chance to practice interacting with clients. They have to answer questions on the spot. I tell my students, it is much better that they practice in the safe classroom settings where they can practice and where mistakes are really less costly. So I hope they appreciate the chance. When I tell them this, I hope they appreciate the chance to practice all of this and motivate them, to appreciate these opportunities for continuous practice, reflections, and feedback, which ultimately prepares them for the real world of work. Teamwork. The next point is teamwork and sense of community. Teamwork. So how do I get my students involved online? I have to create a sense of community. They have never met any of their teammates before the tutorials. So I made an announcement on Blackboard, meeting the teammates online. And I've said in lectures 3, I will arrange for all of you to meet your respective teammates during break. The idea is for you to exchange your contacts in order to prepare for SGS Tutorial 1 presentation. It's important that you attend lectures to meet your team members. And I also tell them the importance of understanding teamwork. Why is interpersonal skills so important? Corporate deals always involve teamwork, both internal and external. Divide and allocate responsibility amongst your teammates to ensure that everyone makes a contribution to the presentation, whether in terms of research, preparation, or presentation. This exercise aims to facilitate deep learning. Beyond acquiring substantive knowledge in relation to listing rules, it is designed for you to develop transferable skills, asking insightful questions, analyze different possibilities, recommending sensible courses of action and solutions for your clients based on informed research and evaluation. I want to give them ownership and autonomy. I want them to divide the work amongst themselves. Learners are much more motivated if you give them the autonomy instead of micromanage them. So, the 7 students, they can divide their responsibility. They can, based on the topics they're interested in or the role they want to play, they can contribute the way they want to contribute. So I purposely give them the autonomy. We must not forget the need to develop students' interpersonal capabilities, practical learning skills, emotional intelligence, and ethical commitments. And these 3 years of online learning, I really feel that students miss out a lot. The peer community at PCLL, it's one of we always celebrate the diversity of, the different backgrounds of our PCL students. Some are from undergraduate LB students, some are from JD, some are from overseas, from UK, from Australia. I really want them to benefit from the peer interaction. And it's what makes our course, exciting. And, long after graduation, it's all these PCL, the connections that really counts long after graduation. So I create these opportunities for them, hopefully. I breakout rooms. I tell them in advance, the sort of the name, the groups they were assigned to. And in the breakout rooms, I ask admin colleagues to pre-assign students to the breakout rooms, so that, at the time when I want them to meet, I'll just open all the rooms and they're assigned to their different rooms with their teammates. And I remind all of them to switch their cameras on when they meet their teammates. So I think students appreciated the opportunity to mix and meet new friends, new peers, not usually the ones who sit next to them in lecture halls, but meeting new peers. Authentic learning materials. I repeatedly emphasize, I use authentic learning materials. These are company synopses based on real IPO and case and transactions. As in the difference between authentic learning materials and fictional materials is that in real transactions, the synopsis cover a lot of information that is non-legal. In real practice, they won't separate legal and non-legal issues for you. It's not like, the exam questions at law school where only relevant facts are given to you. One key ability for a lawyer is to scan through materials quickly and discern what information is relevant and what is not, and what information is missing. So they have to think from a lawyer's perspective, what are the areas that they need to focus on? I give them guidance on what to do in their client pitch. So these are some of the topics that they need to do in their client pitch, which is, their law firm's perspective, the client's profile, why list in Hong Kong, the various special listing rules, due diligence, listing process. And I highlight what is in red. As I've mentioned, these are new topics I haven't taught in my class yet, but I want them to find out. It's the latest topics out there: ESG, spec listing, weighted voting rights. Even if I haven't taught them those topics, I want them to be independent learners and creators of knowledge. So I want them to feel empowered that they can tackle any topics in the future. Law, I always tell my students, law constantly evolve, and we have to have the independent ability to do our own research and come up with our own independent analysis and judgment in light of clients' instructions. So this is what I always add new topics to the pitch exercise. I also give them tips on making a great pitch, planning, preparation, rehearsing, thinking about the strategy meticulously. It's so important. And it's about establishing your credibility and competence to their potential clients. And I always share with my students, at the end of the day, it's not about pass or fail. When you go into work, it's not about pass or fail in your exams. And it's also not about what is in your head. It's about how you communicate with your clients, how you establish a trust, confidence, and credibility, and build your personal reputation in the long run, how your clients will trust you. It's every small work matters, every small task matters. How fast you progress at work is entirely up to you. If you are capable with a small task, people will delegate more to you, and you will progress faster. So this is what I share with them. So I hope I give them the right mindset, which is do their best at every small task. And, at the end of the day, it's not about taking exams. It's the transferable skills and about, building your own personal reputation and also establishing trust with your clients. So let's take a look at some of my students' slides just this year. It's many more slides, but I've only selected some of it to share with you all. You can see it's just one tutorial, but the effort they put in, I'm so proud of them. So this is the law firm expertise. They share about the team members. I think they really enjoy the role play. The agenda for today's presentations, a roadmap for the presentation, the project profile, why list in Hong Kong. Every presentation was different. It's the various analysis of why list in Hong Kong, listing of biotech companies and pre-revenue biotech companies in Hong Kong. They've also discussed recent successful listing. So they understand the market out there. So it's important to know, what are the recent successful deals, listing criterias, how the client, on the right, how the client meets the financial requirements, listing requirements. It's important to apply the client situation in the case, special listing rules, and recommendations to the client, and latest rules on corporate governance and ESG, listing timetable, and at the end, why hire the law firm. So I'm developing their legal professional identity, so they think from the client's perspective and understand the role and of corporate advisory and transactional work. So this is active learning. It need not be, a client presentation. Active learning, it could be any of these. It could be simulation and role plays, client presentations, client interviews, client conference. The goal is to enable the learner to have deep understanding of the matter, so that they not just intellectually understand the materials, they're able to apply the materials and incorporate the materials into a larger worldview. Exceptional learning occurs in professional legal education involves active engagement and the exercise of good judgment. So beyond acquiring substantive knowledge, they will develop different skills like asking questions, struggling with dilemmas, weighing possibilities, weighing consequences, and recommending sensible courses of action based on informed research and evaluation. So these kind of opportunities we create for our students that give them the chance to meet with clients, simulated clients, have face-to-face interaction, and go beyond the casebook or the rule books. And now I will talk about the third element of keys to student engagement, which is high expectations. The final element. I think it's so important to set high expectations. High expectation in terms of student preparation, in terms of class participation, and in terms of student responsibility, professionalism, and identity. I convey my expectations early on in the course. I expect my students to turn on their cameras in tutorials, and they should come prepared and participate. And in the tutorials, I listen closely and observe. If I see students to be reading off their answers and not fully understanding their own answers, I would challenge them to make sure that they understand what they are saying. This shows that I care, and over time, I think students know what to expect from my class. There are extensive literature out there that discuss students respond positively to teachers who set high expectations and demand much of them and challenge them. So I think it's one of the key elements to effective teaching and learning. It's really setting high expectations for preparation, participation, and responsibility. Now, the last topic for today is promoting interactivity in online tutorials and lectures. I want to share specific tips and strategies for online tutorials and lectures. In fact, there is actually a silver lining to online learning. Actually, everyone sits in the front row. You're never too far away from the speaker or the screen. Unlike in the lecture hall where there are 100 students, you have instant access to interact with the lecturer through the chat function. In fact, I find that some introverts or more reserved students are more willing to ask questions and interact through the chat function. So I encourage them to share any questions throughout my lectures or my tutorials. So first on tutorials, for tutorials, I don't permit black boxes in my tutorials. I ask them to turn on my cameras. I will announce this, in my class. Over the years, I've only got 1 or 2 students who don't switch on their cameras. And if they don't, I would politely call on the student's name and ask them to turn it on. Over time, students will know what to expect for your classes if you are consistent with your request. So how can I know whether they are paying full attention, whether they're actively listening, whether they're fully engaged, if I can't see their facial expressions? I think it's so important for a teacher to be observant and perceptive with even the micro expressions, the body language, and the tone of voice. This is how you judge whether it's surface or deep understanding. These subtle cues, it's how I gauge their level of engagement. So it's so important that they switch it on. And I also, of course, have to show my interest when they're presenting. I show my interest through the video as well. So, they must switch on their cameras during tutorials. I encourage them to, if they think it's necessary, to blur or use virtual backgrounds if it makes them more comfortable turning on the cameras. Call on students. I ask them to rename the names to the English name on Zoom at the start of every session. When they join, automatically it's their full Chinese name, in Chinese translation name, but it's very hard to call them. So I will ask them to rename at the start of each class. And I would, every class, I would rotate and call on each student, usually about 15 students, so that everyone should participate at least once in my tutorials before I do an open floor session. I want to make sure every individual feel welcomed and that their voices are valued. So everyone should at least have a turn before I open the session. I don't want any one student to dominate the class. And respectful environment. I think this is another key to effective teaching and learning, online or offline. It's so important to create a respectful environment, a safe, welcoming environment for students to share their thoughts, that they don't feel that they are being judged when they answer. They feel welcomed and included. And I treat my students as equals, as professionals, and I never make any of my students feel inferior. I respect my students, by not tearing them if they missed a point, and they also respect me by giving their undivided attention and come to class engaged and prepared. Growth mindset. To me, I think the magical words to encourage student participation is thanks for trying, thanks for listening, or thanks for raising this question, thanks for your attempt. Even if their answer is wrong, I never embarrass any student. I would praise them just for attempting. The growth mindset means that talent and abilities are developed through effort and practice and learning from feedback and mistakes. So, I just praise them. I encourage attempts. I encourage mistakes. And learner-centered explanations. I won't take my student answers lightly. I won't just give a straight no, without listening further. I would try to point out their individual misconceptions so that they really know that I'm truly actively listening their answers. And on tutorials, I also teach writing and drafting commercial documents course, which is about drafting contracts. So I thought, online tutorials work very well. In face-to-face, I would be using visualizers. I would expect students to print their work and then I would show on the visualizer. But, if students are sitting far at the back in the classroom, it's very hard for them to see some of the work. So actually, online tutorials work quite well for writing and drafting contracts. There are many ways to do it. How do they hand in their homework? Number one, I would ask them to submit work document through the file chat function. It's an excellent way of submitting homework instantly. So when I ask them to draft, confidentiality agreements, letter of intent, sale and purchase agreement, I would ask them to submit their file to me. And then I would scan through the 15 work and then share one or two of them and work together on some of the clauses together. So I can also ask my students to share their work through the share screen function and let them be the moderator. Some colleagues I know use Google Docs, which is you can co-edit and mark up clauses together at the same time. And one more tip to share, which is in face-to-face tutorials, there are sometimes in-class exercise where I would hand out the exercise to them and I would expect to collect it back at the end. The reason being I don't want them to circulate to the next group of students in the next tutorial class. So these are in-class exercises. So how do I do that in an online setting? What I do is I would set up a Google Docs link with that PDF document and I would share that link in the Zoom in the class. The link is for viewers for reading only. Viewers cannot download, they cannot copy, or they cannot print the document. After the session, I would delete the link so that it's only for them to use during that session. And this is how I do in-class exercise, replacing in-class handouts. So it's a document link that you can delete after class. And last 2 points on online lectures. After tutorials, I want to talk about lectures. I mean, this point, which is breaking lectures into segments and sections, applies online or offline. we all know our attention span is only around 20 minutes before our attention starts to wane. And particularly with online lessons, it's so hard to sit there for 3 hours and focus. So how do I do that? This is a sample of my 3-hour lecture rundown. I would start off recapping my last lecture, refreshing the memory, what they've learned last time. And then I would introduce and give them a roadmap of what I'm going to do this lecture. So as a structured roadmap for this clear learning outcomes. And I would usually have some videos or news or authentic learning materials from news from Hong Kong Stock Exchange or from videos to share with them, hopefully to arouse their curiosity and interest in the topic. And then I would follow up with my presentation about the rules. Then I would incorporate some interactive activity, whether it's handouts or multiple choice or case study, and sometimes put them into breakout rooms. Other times I would invite them to give their response in chat. So, breaking up into small sections so that there's more interactivity. And then sometimes I would follow with more presentations and more interactive activity. At the end, I would recap today's lecture, revisit it, what I've done this class, and I would always end with a Q&A live chat session. I would ask anyone who wants to stay behind the class, please feel free to stay behind. And a lot of times, more than half would stay behind. I have over 100 students for my corporate finance class. I think they appreciate the online interactive live chats. So at the end, they would submit their chats and I would live chat with them and answer any questions. This is essential because now we don't have face-to-face. It's essential that they feel that they are supported and that the teachers care about their questions and learning. What are the interactive exercise we can have as part of lectures? We can have revision quiz. I can have case scenarios, ABC, different scenarios for them to come up with an answer. We have short questions, multiple choice. I particularly like summary charts. You can see right here, there's a summary chart. Sometimes I would go through different rules and then I would give them a summary chart and ask them to fill out that chart by themselves, basically just summarizing what I've just covered. So it's a summary charts. And then we can use, obviously, breakout rooms for peer discussions. How do I invite their answers? They can either type out their answers through screen cap or file their answers or send in their chat and I would share their work online. So that brings us to the close to the end of the presentation. But before I end, I think there's nothing better to end my seminar than to show you a very short video clip of students engaging in online learning, which really encapsulates all that I've been talking about: motivation, active learning, high expectations, and community. So let's take a look at this short video.
Around the globe. We are based in Hong Kong, but we truly have a global perspective. I am Xenia today, and I'm glad to have with me today my team, Jacob, Patrick, Irene, Vince, and Daniel. So today, we will briefly introduce you about our firm and our lawyers, our team, and then we'll give you some very general backgrounds about the IPO projects and why you should do it in Hong Kong. And then we will walk you through the different
Genovo, already reaching a commercialization stage, with Radizavir getting incredibly close to that point. And then also with ASC 09 and 06 completing a number of trials and ASC 21 hopefully entering into trials within the coming years. We will revisit this later, as having a core product past conceptualization is very important for certain listing requirements, and having other products which are near there and have potential to reach there will satisfy certain qualms that the exchange may have when accepting a biotech company to be listed in Hong Kong. And you will see this table again
this new specialist chapter called Chapter 18A under the listing rules, which Alpha can really consider. And this is a new chapter that was introduced on the 30th of April 2018. And the reason why there was this new chapter was because the Hong Kong Exchange understood that there would be a lot of difficulties for biotech companies to really get the capital for R&D first, and they couldn't get the capital before they even commercialize their products. And indeed, if Alpha can satisfy the requirements under Chapter 18A, then it can really list as a biotech issuer under it. And the main reason and the main purpose of having Chapter 18A here is actually to permit listings of all the pre-revenue biotech issuers that do not meet any of the main board financial eligibility requirements, as Daniel just discussed. So I will now walk you through some of the backgrounds as well as some of the requirements of Chapter 18A. Now on to the next slide. We can see that according to the report from Frost and Sullivan, there have already been 48 deals completed under Chapter 18A, having raised more than 110 billion Hong Kong dollars. And as you can see, although the new chapter.
So now we know that we think that Alpha should list on Chapter 18A. So it's now my turn to tell you why you should choose to partner with us, Lyle & Co. We have over 20 years of providing legal services for Hong Kong and PRC related IPO transactions. We have an extensive track records in IPO, and we also have extensive experience in Chinese companies. I think one of our major advantage is that all of our lawyers are here at the concerns in every stage of an IPO process. We are well catered to serve the needs of our clients throughout the whole process. On top of that, we also have a great reputation in the field and a good track record. In 2021 alone, we have worked on 15 IPO deals, and throughout our years of practice, we have also completed 10 Chapter 18A IPO deals. We were lucky enough to rank Tier 1 in.
Okay, so it's just some excerpts. I wish I can share with you more because there are many, many wonderful parts and every single pitch is different. So I hope that, from this sharing, you can see my students are engaged. I think they enjoy it. I can see from them that they enjoy the role play. It's high quality work. It's just one tutorial session. It's not, exam. It's not, the scores doesn't count. And they're developing their professional identity, thinking from the client's perspective. It's also commercial awareness and understanding market trends. And it's deep learning because they're putting listing rules into context and not just applying. They're advising their clients and applying their knowledge. So, and it's only the first tutorials before I even begin the whole transaction, from moving on to due diligence and listing, etc. So this is the first tutorial. So this is some ways for me to share
around the globe.
Sorry.
We
Moving on to the next slide, which is the final slide, which is what we've discussed today. So hopefully, thank you everyone for this session. Hopefully these are some ways to encourage student participation in online learning. We've only got about very short time left for my seminar, so I invite you, if you want to have any comments for me, please write your comments in the chat function. I will read some of the chat questions which I've received. Hello, Professor Jane Chang. I'm Jane Chang from Nottingham Law School. I'm so glad you're joining us all the way from UK and that you remember me since my visit to Nottingham. Thank you so much for joining today. Really, really glad to see you on here today. There is another question, which is, do you, from Hessel, Lobo, do you offer credit for participation? We are considering this here, but wonder what others have found if they do this. Credit for participation. Yeah, good question. For this session, this this client pitch exercise, there's no credit because it's just 1 out of 6 tutorials. it's just part of the exercise. It doesn't count towards the exam scores. But what I'm really touched is that our students put in so much efforts, even though it doesn't count towards their scores. It's the intrinsic motivation. What do they get? They get praises from me at the end. So I hope that, and also they feel empowered, because once they have done it, they feel that, they are capable of doing the client pitch. So it's about intrinsic motivation. But it's a very good question you raised, because on another occasion, if it's another course, if it's something I can do for my, LLB or LLM or JD electives, I would, perhaps as part of the evaluation process, student presentations can count towards the score, certainly, part of the score. So I think it depends on your course. So thank you for the question. One question, how can one apply your wonderful strategy, say for a module like criminal law from Augustine? Thank you, an excellent question. I'm not a criminal law expert myself. There are other experts, my colleagues out there, but criminal law, I understand my colleagues would do trial advocacy, conference skills, and all these other ways, also client interviews. Simulated clients, we always do a lot of work on client interviews. So these are other ways, basically simulation and role play in context. So thank you for your question, but I think it requires a criminal expert to answer that. And thank you so much for everyone's kind thought. Jane, it's a pleasure and much food for thought in your seminar. And thank you so much, Queenie, for your excellent sharing. We really learned a lot from your informative presentation. Thank you. Another question is, let's take a look. It's from Shmuel, and how do we encourage student participation in educational process and in university life generally, particularly when we are transforming to Zoom and remote learning, and to increase support participation for students? That is an excellent question, and I wish I have more time to discuss on that. I really, really think, after 2.5 years of, remote learning and online learning, there's so much we should do to support our students, particularly, positive well-being. This year is already better because the first term they were face-to-face, and at least they have met some of their students. There were 2 years where it was completely online and remote learning. We really need to have more active learning exercise and building a community of support, that you're always ready to answer your students' question. And offline, I always have Zoom meetings with my students offline these days. Many of them approach me, we connect through LinkedIn, we connect through Facebook, we connect through all these ways. And if they want career advice, I'm always happy to chat. So I think it's just being there, and also creating these communities, activities where they can meet each other. I know that some of my group members, over time, they would form their own WhatsApp group to support each other, and that is so important. Perhaps I should remind them to do so. Yes, that's thank you for your question. I think I will have a few more minutes left. Let's take a look. Thank you, James, who is one of my students. I'm glad that I have the luxury as a student to attend your classes and witness your passion in teaching. Just a quick question during student presentation: how can students get instant non-verbal feedback from teacher? Non-verbal feedback, I think it's feedback, right? Non-verbal feedback. During student presentation, well, just for my client pitch exercise, I often, join in and give questions as a client throughout the client pitch presentation, because I do want to have some interaction. I save my comments at the end of the presentation because I don't want to you know, I am still role playing at the client as the client during the presentation, but at the end, I'll give you my feedback. So I hope that answers your question. And is there anything else? Emma, thank you. Emma Flint, thank you for your question. If you do grade and assess it, would you share past examples of student presentations with the current cohort as exemplars? You could then do marking exercise with the students to help them understand how they would be marked. Oh, that is an excellent point, excellent question. Thank you. I think this may be the last question I'll take today, but thank you for that. In my tutorial, in my class, I do share some slides from past presentations from past years as examples, but in terms of marking, because my course is not graded, so I didn't go into too much detail into that. But I know, having joined the simulated client workshop in London, Society of Legal Scholars, and talking with Professor Paul and also my colleagues at Hong Kong U, they do a lot of work on simulated clients, particularly with client interviews, and they really use it as client interviews as a summative assessment. They really mark them. So I think on those occasions, they should give them marking criteria and examples of past presentations or interviews to show them how it works. So I think it depends whether it's graded or not. But with that, I think that is the last question. I'm so glad to see all of your comments, and thank you for all your support, you know, particularly with colleagues all around the world and my students and alumni as well. You know, really wonderful to see you all. So thank you, take care, and stay safe in the COVID times. Thank you, everyone.